job today is really into the sanding of the body of the guitar now. So essentially got everything set up with a wide selection of sandpapers which will be ready to go, starting at about the 140 grit, and we'll gradually move our way up from there. First thing to do is actually I think it's going to be about a 180 grit on the body here, basically to just sort of get rid of this fairly rough stuff here. This stuff in the pocket's not really obviously going to be such a issue, but once we then start getting into the body here, we want it to be all nice and smooth for the painting. So this is going to take a number of steps to get ourselves going properly there. So it's also going to need some sanding filler on here. So the sanding filler is something which is new to me, something I guess aware of. It's kind of like a pre-primer type thing that we're going to use, and what that'll do is put us in a position where the sort of grains of this are filled, more so than trying to sand it into a smooth surface. The ash is one of those woods that benefits, according to the research I've done, benefits quite well from getting some filler in here. So we'll be putting that on there at some stage and getting that all ready to go for painting. The other thing, which won't be as much of a job for today, depending on how we go, is also sanding the neck. Now, because the neck is just getting essentially a stain, and that's really going to be about it, I want to leave it as smooth as possible. That's going to be a simpler job. It doesn't need to be sanded nearly as aggressively as we do with the body here. So we'll see how we go from there. Also of some note, we've got these are like the really cheap version of the what they call bench cookies, or there's similar derivatives. There's a few different brands out there. Usually they're like a sort of a hard foam with a not an abrasive, but like a very, very grippy finish on them. These are like the cheap and nasty version of them, but will actually work out quite well when it comes to just keeping the body off the bench. I've given it a good clean up, but as you can see, this bench was made out of just some laminated ply, I think we used here. So there's some gaps here and some uneven bits. It really needs to have a set of 2x4s laid on top of it, but that'll be a job for another day. So for right now, it's just going to be the knockoff bench cookies, and that'll get us started. So it's a little bit interesting as we sort of get into the sanding a little bit more. As you can see, some of these quite deep pieces of grain doesn't necessarily show up that well on camera, but the interesting thing with them is that whilst we may get to the stage where we can fill them, I don't want to rely on filler to actually do the job and tidy this up. So there is actually quite a lot of smoothing. It's certainly starting to go the right way, but yeah, plenty of work left to do on here. You can feel the difference from the top surfaces that I've been working on to the sides here, even through the gloves. You can feel quite a lot of how much rougher it is there. So it's coming along, but yeah, we've only replaced one piece of sandpaper so far. So I think we've got plenty yet to work with. Something I think's worth really making note of is on these corners here, where you can kind of see that it's nice and rounded over, but the thing that I'm being really careful with is not to really dig in here with the sandpaper at all. This sort of corner is something I'm going to be approaching really slowly, because the nature of the Telecaster is that it doesn't have any sort of relief or belly cuts in it, so it's quite sharp angles on it. It's kind of more like your Les Paul style edges. Or you could say the Les Paul has Telecaster style edges, but what I want to be cautious of is flattening this out and sort of removing the distinct edge. So this is something we really have to take a little bit of time with. You can see also again how deep some of the grain is, and I think that probably shows up quite well on camera, just how deep the grain is on this wood. So a lot to do to get that sanded back nicely. in time for the filler, and then really to give it a nice smooth finish. So in this step, what we're going to start looking at is getting ready for the sanding sealer to go on, which is this one here I'm using from Feast Watson, which has come at least somewhat recommended, so that'll hopefully do the job on getting this ash to essentially seal up. Most of what I'm sort of seeing, as I've possibly mentioned before, is you sand away and it really just opens up new grain, so it needs to get itself sealed. The last thing I want to do before we put this on, not that this is, the pocket here is not visible, but I want to make sure it's got a very nice smooth finish for the neck to sit on when it goes in there. I'm just going to do a little bit of a touch up on the pickup cavities here and the area for the switches. Main reason being is that this is going to get copper tape going in here, which is going to mean that this is covered, but I want this to be nice and smooth as well, so that the copper tape has a nice way of grounding itself against the wood, and we can get going from there. So that's really going to be the next step on the guitar build, is getting that sanding sealer going. Then we're ready to start looking at the paint, which is where it's going to start getting interesting.